right, everybody. Hello, welcome to the presentation. Thank you so much for being here. And I appreciate all of you guys spending this beautiful Friday. Happy Friday to you. Hopefully, wherever you are, hopefully you're having a fantastic Friday. And there we go. Now we're live on all of our platforms. I want to remind folks, for those of you who are new, I have two computers. And we run the computer here on TikTok and here on all the other social media platforms, which is quite a bit. And so that's why if you ever see me look here, it's because I'm panning camera here to pan camera there. So that's what you do. And I have multiple microphones, and I think everything is good. Okay, folks, welcome. Happy Friday to you. Wherever you are in this world, I hope that you're having a great Friday. Yes, CL, I have. Yep. And we'll talk about that in a moment. All right, folks, I'm Bishop Long. Welcome to the presentation. And I want to give you a couple, let's do the business part first before we get into the presentation, because we have a really very cool show tonight. This is only the one time out of the week, 2 hours out of the entire week, that we dedicate to the paranormal. The rest of the time, Monday through Friday, and Sundays and Wednesdays, we focus on the Bible and scripture. So for those of you who are saying, you need to be preaching the Bible, well, you need to show up when we have night prayer Monday through Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I actually do teach about the Bible. On Sundays and Wednesdays, we have Bible study for 2 hours. Show up then, and then maybe you can be less judgmental. Just saying. Okay. Otherwise, 2 hours a week. That's it. And here we are. I want you to go to our sponsor's website, but in a moment, Mr. Producer, roll that footage.
Fans of Bishop James Long, the renowned exorcist and paranormal expert on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Now you can carry his wisdom with you. Our Bishop James Long collection features blessed apparel such as St. Benedict hats and tees, as well as home items to protect and inspire. Elevate your spiritual journey. Go to kgradb.com/shop and discover the Bishop James Long merch today.
Okay, so folks, those of you who are just tuning in, I want you to please do us a favor. Go to our sponsor's website, KGRAD as in dog, B as in bicycle. It's KGRADB Radio. We are on KGRADB Radio, and if you would do me a favor, go to the website, KGRAD as in dog, B as in bicycle.com. Click on the shop link, and then click my name. Now, if you click my name, it takes you to a very cool site that has St. Michael items, St. Benedict items, really some amazing, and the hoodies. I tell you, the products are great. But here's why I want you to do this. Not because I'm making a penny off this, because I'm not. As a matter of fact, 100%, and Mr. Producer can tell you, he can verify if you want him to, but 100% of the profits that would go to me, as a community, we are donating it to the MKS Kids Foundation. They are an orphanage in Uganda, and we are helping them out. We are doing beautiful work with these guys. I just want to let you know, you guys have really stepped up and helped the MKS Kids Foundation. So they are a nonprofit organization. They're self-funded, and they have helped so many kids. And I think it's great. Absolutely wonderful. And for those of you who are saying, well, why don't you do this for America? I do it for America. I'm also a donor for an orphanage here in Louisville, Kentucky, and have been for about 20 years. And I can do both. So you can chew gum and walk at the same time. So the fact of the matter is these kids in Uganda have nothing. And there's a big difference between orphanages in Uganda or children who are homeless in Uganda and United States. I've said this many times before. When you see the kids with great big bellies, it's not because they're full. It's because they have parasites in their stomach from the contaminated water. So we as a community, we help the MKS Kids Foundation. And I am honored to partnering with them to help them. So all you got to do is go to KGRAD as in dog, B as in bicycle.com. Look, it's October. Christmas is right around the corner. Now is the time get your items, because not only will you be getting amazing, really cool items, but you'll also be helping the MKS Kids Foundation, an orphanage. And I think that's a win-win for everybody. Also, if you want to go to my website, you can certainly do so. It's bishopjameslong.com. I have a very, very exciting announcement to make. I have a brand new book out. And you can go to my website, bishopjameslong.com. Scroll down, you'll see where it says Bishop Long's book. And it is a Bishop Long's training manual for paranormal investigators. I have put 35 years of my experience, life experience, into this book. It is incredibly detailed. And here's what's even better. Not only are you getting a book that took me a long time to write, 100%, 100% of the profits I am donating to the MKS Kids Foundation. 100%. As a matter of fact, I spoke to them. They had some problems with their PayPal. They were able to get that fixed. So I uploaded their PayPal account to the book. And so when you buy that book, just know that 100% of the profits goes to them. And guys, I'm telling you, we are making a difference. We're making a difference. And I know that we are, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But I want you to go to the church's website, usocc.org, usocc.org. That's the church's website. We have night prayer at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So please consider joining us. We'll be live here. I've noticed something, and I am going to toot the horn here of the USOCC, but I've noticed that the videos that the MKS Kids Foundation made, it's dramatically different than what they're making now. And I say that because of your help. You have made an absolute difference in these children's lives. And that to me is remarkable. It is remarkable. I've seen the quality of the videos. I've seen the food. There's so much that they're doing for these kids. Remember, $1 in the United States may not go very far, but in Uganda, it goes a lot further than you think. And so I think that's wonderful. I think that is truly wonderful. Well, thank you there, Vulture. Here's the deal. What we're trying to do here, there's so much negativity in this world. So much negativity. Hello there, Sister Jennifer. There's so much negativity that when you're able to offer some type of positive influence, that kind of helps you get through the dark days of life. Every single one of us has difficult times. And when you know that you're able to bless others, that is a blessing in of itself. So there we go. Okay. So make sure, again, purchase the book. You can just go to bishopjameslong.com. There it is. My website, bishopjameslong.com. Scroll down and you'll see right there where it says Bishop Long's new book. It's Bishop Long's Paranormal Investigating Training Manual. It is in depth. So I will tell you that it's not a 20-page read. And so, again, 100% of the profits is going to the MKS Kids Foundation, the orphanage in Uganda. All right. So there we go, guys. That is and I'll remind you when we get to the top of the hour, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'll remind everybody again, because inevitably, people come in a little later, and that's fine. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is quite chilling, and I think, quite honestly, frightening, because it's true. And I have to say unalivers because of TikTok regulations. I just have to. So when I say serial unalivers, thank you, Trish, you know what I'm trying to say. And our topic tonight is going to be, we're going to talk about Ed Gein. And Ed Gein, there is a new show out. I have seen the show. I've seen the entire thing, all the episodes, and it's on Netflix. And there are things in the Netflix series that was incorrect, that were wrong, that was just done basically for dramatic purposes. So I'm giving you guys heads up on that. So when I get to that part of the show, which will be a little bit later on, just know that some spoilers will be given. but I think it's important for you to know what was real and what was not. And I think that's important to understand. The story in of itself is alarming. And that's right. Yeah, Cheeto. Remember, discretion is advised, because this is a topic that is quite alarming and, may trigger. So you just need to be aware of this. Canon law. I studied canon law actually when I was in the Roman seminary in graduate school. Studied the catechism as well. Very, very familiar with canon law and catechism. All right. Let's do this presentation, and then we're going to get into our presentation on Ed Gein. First, when we talk about serial unalivers, I think it's important to understand what this is. When I was studying in the Roman seminary, studied for 6 years, received my minor orders, very familiar with canon law and, of course, the catechism. A serial unaliver is a person who unalives 3 or more people over a period of more than 30 days, with a cooling off period between each unaliving, whose motivation for unaliving is largely based on psychological gratification. Now, often there is a sexual element that is involved with the unalivings, and it may have been attempted or completed in similar fashion, and the victims may have had something in common. For example, occupation or race, appearance, sex, age group. What I'm going to give you a presentation like a psychological profile on people who do this, and then we're going to get into some cases where I'm going to talk to you about some of the most famous cases that you guys are aware of, and then Ed Gein. When I was studying in the seminary, I had the opportunity to sit across an individual that was a serial unaliver. And what startled me more than anything, I was speaking to my sister about this earlier, is that the crime that he committed was so horrific that when he was describing it, it was as if he was describing how he made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that day. There was no emotion. And I can't, because on TikTok, I'm not able to get into detail, and I don't think it's necessary. But think of the worst case you can possibly think of, and that I'm sure he did that in some way. So let's just leave it at that. But the only time that there was any type of emotion is when he got a little excited about how he took something from the scene. And in his mind, you could see when he was talking about that, he was kind of getting almost giddy. He was reliving that experience by talking about what he took. Also, I'm going to show you, I do have an actual pair of Jeffrey Dahmer's old glasses. They are actually Jeffrey Dahmer's. And also, I'm going to show again some paintings of John Wayne Gacy that I've collected through the years that people have purchased, and then activity started in their home. So again, I'm going to remind everybody on TikTok, I have chat on for everyone. But if it gets rude, I'm going to put sub chat on like that, and I won't give it a second thought. So just be kind. All right, let's talk about the characteristics of a serial unaliver. First, and this is from the FBI, they tend to be single white males, intelligent. And they have employment difficulties. They were often abandoned by their fathers and raised sometimes by their mom. There was criminal, psychiatric, and other abuse histories. They had a high rate of unaliving attempts. There seemed to be extreme interest in voyeurism, fetishes. What's interesting also is they have a history of bedwetting. Some are fascinated with fires, and many have enjoying sadistic activity. This is why I say all the time, trolling is sadistic. We have normalized abnormal behavior in our society. When you troll another person and you're using your words to try to hurt that person, that is sadism. Sadism doesn't just mean physical. It also means intellectual or emotional. So when you're using your words to try to hurt another person and you sit back and you watch and it makes you happy and excited, that's abnormal psychology. Psychosis is rarely noted among these individuals. Many of them are psychopaths. They suffer a lot from a specific cluster of dysfunctional personality characteristics. Most is antisocial personality, or even dissocial personality disorder. When I was at Loyola University and studying, I did a research on these individuals. And I was so, from an exorcist perspective, I've always been fascinated by the mind and how much of people who think it is a demon versus psychosis. Now, the types of serial unalivers, the organized, there are two types. There's organized and disorganized. The organized are usually people who have above average intelligence. They're very methodological. They lure victims, maintain control over the crime scene. They love following their crimes in the media. They're socially adequate. Then you have the disorganized serial unalivers. Low intelligence, they're impulsive. They unalive when the opportunity arises. And they rarely remove or dispose of the remains, usually just leaving the remains where they found it. Hello, everybody. Okay. There's approximately, this is from the FBI, there's approximately 400 serial unalivers in the United States in the past century, with anywhere from 2,500 to about 4,000 victims. Between 50 to 300 serial unalivers are active at any point in time right now. What's frightening is serial unalivers have increased over the past 30 years. And 80% of the 400 of the past century have emerged since the 1950s. So let's talk about the motives. Well, one, it's called the visionary motive type, insane, psychotic, compelled to unalive by entities such as the devil, like the devil made them do it, or even God. So they hear the devil's voice or God's voice. There is the mission-oriented type, and that means they display no psychosis. They believe that they need to rid the world of what they consider immoral or unworthy. Many times the victims there are prostitutes or young women or LGBT. And there's also hedonistic type. So they derive pleasure from unaliving, lust, thrill, comfort. All right. Excellent. All right. So guys, I can't get into your questions because I'm doing a lecture right now. So just bear with me. Okay. So the reason is I say unaliver, as I mentioned in the beginning of the show, is because I have to because of TikTok requirements. So when I say serial unalivers, they are serial with the, and then a K. I can't say the K word because I'll be banned on TikTok. So I have to say unalivers because of TikTok requirements. Again, I'm not answering any questions. I'm giving a lecture, and that's how we do the show. So hold on to the lecture, hold on to your questions until after the lecture is over. There are also power control type. So objective is to gain power or control over the victim. Often these unalivers are abused as children. And then you have medical professionals. Yeah, moderators, if you can keep reminding people. So then there's medical professionals. And these unalivers are often regarded as angels of death. If you remember Dr. Jack Kevorkian. Dr. Jack Kevorkian. Karen, I answered your question. That's why I just answered it. Some other motives are a lust serial unaliver. Sex is the primary motive. There is a thrill unaliver. So it's the primary goal is to inflict pain. And there's the comfort unaliver, material gain, extravagant lifestyle are primary motives. So the lust unalivers, that's the commission of an unaliving, obviously because of lust. And we understand that. We don't have to get into a deep explanation of that. All right, let's go into I got to be I hate doing this show because I have to be very careful about everything that I say. So I'm being incredibly mindful because of TikTok. First, let us get into Jeffrey Dahmer. So we're going to go into some of these individuals that are unalivers. And okay, I'm done. This is getting annoying. Somebody tries to do something good, and the trolls keep doing it. No matter what, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much work you put into a presentation, you trolls continue to ruin everything. You are so spiritually lost. So now subchat is on, and it will remain on. That's the way it's going to be. Okay, Jeffrey Dahmer. It's never going to change. They're just so full of evil. Let's go into this to this story because it is truly terrifying. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And from a young age, Dahmer exhibited troubling behavior, showing an unsettling fascination with animals that had passed away. He would collect the bodies of small animals and dissect them. His childhood was marked by neglect, a sense of isolation, leading him to retreat even further into darker thoughts. Dahmer himself actually stated, quote, "I felt like I was different from everyone else. I was always an outsider, and that made me angry and confused." And little did anyone know those feelings would manifest into something horrific. So as Dahmer grew older, his desires became more sinister. And after his parents' divorce, well, he spiraled into a life of abuse, increasingly violent fantasies. So in 1978, shortly after graduating high school, Dahmer committed his first unaliving, luring a young hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks to his home. What began as a night of drinking quickly turned into a nightmare. Dahmer said, "I had this overwhelming urge to dominate and possess. I could feel the darkness taking over." And he says, "I didn't see him as a person anymore." So this chilling admission reveals the transformation of Dahmer from a troubled young man into a remorseless unaliver. And again, for the 100th time, I have to say unaliver instead of the K word because of TikTok regulations. Over the next 13 years, Dahmer would go on to unalive 17 young men, employing various methods to unalive his victims. His acts of violence were not just about unaliving, they included necrophilia and even cannibalism. So Dahmer lured his victims to his apartment with a promise of money or illicit substances, companionship. And he would also say that he wants to take a picture, and he would pay them because he thinks he'd be a great model. He gave them illegal substances, and they would kind of be out of it to basically fulfill his darkest fantasies. And Jeffrey said, "I would keep them around almost like trophies. It was as if they were a part of me. I wanted to possess them completely." Now, his apartment became a grisly collection of parts, macabre testament of his twisted desires. Neighbors often complained about strange odors coming from his apartment. In July of 1991, Dahmer's reign of terror came to an end. One of his intended victims, Tracy Edwards, managed to escape, flagged down 2 police officers. What's interesting, Dahmer, later on into his life, he would go into this trance, and he would watch The Exorcist 3. And there was a particular scene that he said it would make him go into like this trance. And then he wouldn't remember anything. So when officers at this time, when Tracy Edwards escaped, when officers entered Dahmer's apartment, they were met with a horror unlike anything they'd ever encountered. The sight of photographs depicting dismembered, obviously, and the smell of decay. And when they found the evidence, Jeffrey said, "I knew it was over. I was both relieved, terrified that was finally caught." And Dahmer's arrest shocked the nation as details of his gruesome acts emerged. Now, Dahmer's trial opened in 1992, and he faced multiple charges of unaliving. His defense team argued that he was insane, but the prosecution painted a picture of a calculating unaliver. As the trial unfolded, Dahmer expressed remorse for his actions, but many found it hard to believe. He says, "I'm not a monster," he said, "I'm just a man who lost control." But for the families of the victims, the pain was unimaginable. In 1992 of November, Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison. He became the subject of Fascination and Fear, countless documentaries. In 1994, he met a violent end in prison. He was unalived by a fellow inmate. So the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, it's a chilling exploration of the human psyche, revealing the potential for evil that can exist in a lot of people. Now, I want to share something with you. This is a pair of Dahmer's glasses. There was a 17-year-old young man, who had contacted Dahmer, and he was fascinated with Dahmer and the whole story. And Dahmer was kind of smitten with him. And so he asked Dahmer if he could have something of his. And Dahmer said, okay. Well, he had a pair of old glasses that he sent this young man. Well, the family found out about this. And the mom hit the roof. She said, "I don't want this in my home. I want it gone. I want it out of my house." And these are an actual pair of Dahmer's. These are the pair of Dahmer's glasses. And with a note that he wrote him, "Enjoy my glasses. Respectfully yours, Jeff." Obviously, the mom did not want these glasses in the home, and we can understand why. So for those of you just joining, I'm Bishop Long, and we're talking about serial unalivers. Again, for the gazillionth time, I have to say unaliver because of TikTok. I can't say the K word. So when I say unalive, someone unalived someone, that means someone, you get it. So we're talking about serial unalivers, and in a moment, we're going to be talking about Ed Gein and the Netflix show that many people are talking about. When I was at Loyola, I tried to do a psychological profile on one of the presentations that I did in the psychology class, actually, we were taking. And I studied a lot about Ed Gein. There were many things on the Netflix show, thank you, that were incorrect. And I want to share what those are, but that'll be after this presentation. So let's talk about John Gacy. John Gacy is known as the unaliving clown. Gacy's horrific crimes and his ability to blend into society made his story even more chilling. So John Gacy was born in 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. And from a young age, Gacy's life was marked by turmoil. When I was at Loyola University, when I had my car, I actually drove past in that neighborhood. And you felt that eeriness. That his house, by the way, was torn down and a new house was built on top of the property. Gacy actually experienced a very abusive relationship with his father. And as a child, Gacy was different, charming, but troubled. He learned to mask his pain behind a smile, a trait that would become disturbingly ironic. And Gacy once reflected on his childhood saying, quote, "I was just a boy who wanted to be loved. And instead, I was taught to hide my true self." Little did anyone know that it was the beginning of a duality that would haunt many. So in the 60s, Gacy began to build a facade of normalcy. He became a successful contractor, a beloved member of the community, even dressed as a clown for kids' parties. But beneath the cheerful exterior lay a very dark, twisted soul. So Gacy's charm allowed him to lure young boys to his home. He would ultimately commit horrible acts. He says, I was like a puppet master pulling the strings. They trusted me because I was just the guy next door, but they had no idea what I'd planned. His chilling admission reveals the calculated nature of his crimes. So between 1972 and 78, Gacy lured at least 33 young men to his home, where he subjected them to unimaginable horrors. I personally believe there was a lot more. I don't think 33 comes close. I think he had been doing this all his life. Many went missing, their families left in anguish and confusion. So Gacy would often use a trick he called the handcuff trick to entice his victims into submission. What he would do is he claimed he was just playing a game. And once they were in his grasp, he said, once they were in my grasp, fear took over. I was no longer in control. I was a monster. And the brutality of his actions was unfathomable. I mean, he choked, he did terrible things. And he buried them in his crawl space in his home. And he actually said, once they were gone, they were gone. I didn't think about it. I just went to bed the next day. Didn't even think about it. In December 1978, Gacy's facade began to crumble. The police arrested him following the disappearance of a 15-year-old Robert Peist, who was last seen leaving work to meet Gacy for a potential job. The police actually, so during the investigation, authorities uncovered a horrifying truth. Detectives discovered human remains buried in Gacy's crawl space. Grisly testament of his heinous acts. And what Gacy said when they found the bodies, he said, I felt the whole world was watching me. I was no longer the friendly clown. I was the monster under the bed. So Gacy's trial became a media sensation, drawing attention to the horrors he had inflicted upon young men. And during the trial, Gacy pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming that he had multiple personalities. But the evidence against him was overwhelming. So as the prosecution presented their case, Gacy's chilling demeanor, calculated response, left many horrified. Gacy said, I didn't want to hurt anyone. They forced my hand. I was just a man who lost control. So in March 1980, Gacy was convicted of 33 unalivings and sentenced to death. His case sparked debates of mental health, criminal, psychology, justice system. So I'm going to share with you a couple of paintings that Gacy did. These are actual, real paintings. So what happened, people know that I've been in the paranormal field for a long time, and families contacted me, and they purchased these paintings, and they start having activity in their home. And they didn't know what to do with the paintings. They were going to burn them, throw them away, destroy them. I said, nope, send them to me. I will bless them. I will bless your home, which I did. And I don't know why people want to buy this stuff. So don't buy these things. Gacy painted quite a bit, actually, when he was in prison. And he did that because that was how he raised money for his defense. Oddly enough, here is a painting of Jesus. And it will always remain in a plastic covering to protect the painting itself. This is a picture of cabins. This is an actual painting. Signature. What he would always do in every single one of his paintings, he would poke his finger and put a little bit of blood right here as a blood sacrifice. And it says, I'm Pogo, because Pogo is the clown that he named. So this is an actual painting. And this is the other painting that he purchased. I'll show you guys. Okay. I went to a paranormal conference not too long ago, and someone walked past that, and they just felt really dizzy. It's a heavy. You can feel the heaviness there. Now, the next person I want to speak about is Eileen Wuornos. Well, as soon as they bought these items, the family never had problems in their home ever before. But for some reason, I guess they saw the movie or the Gacy, and they were just so fascinated by it, and they were able to find paintings that people sold, and that was verified, that was validated as true paintings, and they brought them home, and then they started having activity. And so they said the only thing that we can conclude is that obviously it was because of the paintings. And so I have a storage facility full of items that are incredibly dangerous. And I say dangerous because they are. And the reason is I teach about this. People have got to stop collecting these things. They have to stop. There are people collecting these items. I am telling you, I have never seen so many people buy things online. Now, there's a lot of people who are selling stuff online saying that there's a demon possessed. And or people say, okay, I'd like to have that. I don't know why. Curiosity, I don't know. But the problem is they don't know what that person did to that item. Did that person place a curse on this item? We don't know. All right, the next case, Eileen Wuornos, and we're going to talk about a couple more, and then we'll talk about Ed Gein in a moment. So Eileen Wuornos, if you've not seen the movie with Charlize Theron, it's called Monster. It's pretty remarkable. Pretty remarkable. Eileen Wuornos was born in 1956 in Michigan. She was abandoned by her parents. She faced a tumultuous childhood. It was terrible. So her early years were marked by instability, leading her to live on the streets as a young teenager. And in her own words, she reflected on her childhood in a chilling manner. She says, I never had a chance. Nobody cared. I was just a wild animal in a world that wanted to eat me alive. Eileen's raw honesty reveals the pain that she carried, and the darkness began to seep into her very soul. So even as a young teenager, she would sleep out in the woods, and young boys would go and pay her money to do things. Obviously, you fill in the blanks. So even at a young childhood, that's how she learned how to get money. So as Eileen moved through her late teens and early 20s, she resorted to adult work to survive in very dangerous situations. And in her own words, she described the harrowing encounter she faced. She said, they're all wolves, meaning the men that paid her, waiting to pounce. She said, I had to fight back. I had to survive. Now, her testimony reveals the fear and desperation that drove her to commit her first unaliving. In 1989, she unalived and her first victim, Richard Mallory. I absolutely am convinced that Richard Mallory, based on the case that I read, I think that he did something. And I believe that self-defense should have been used in that case. And I'll tell you why. It made me so angry that the prosecuting attorney, that the courts would not allow Richard Mallory's prior convictions to be revealed to the jury, because they said it could cause issues or sway the jury. Well, here's the problem. Richard Mallory had a history of abuse against women, and they did not allow that testimony in court. So I think that was wrong. And so he had a history of this. And she came across Richard Mallory, and I do believe that he was going to abuse her. Absolutely this. And so she unalived him. And the act of violence marked the beginning of a terrifying spree that would leave 7 men unalived. Now, in saying that, Richard Mallory, I could see self-defense. But there were several that were not self-defense. This was cold-blooded. So I'll explain that in a moment. So Eileen's crimes grew even more brutal. She continued her unaliving spree. She targeted men who she claimed had threatened her. And as she moved from one victim to the next, the fear in her heart, it transformed into something darker. And Eileen even said, I was in a frenzy. It was like a switch flipped. I wasn't just fighting for my life, I was fighting for my soul. Well, the police were baffled by the sudden rise in numbers, and each victim left behind, no, we're not. Your live is redirecting users to purchase products outside TikTok. We are not. We haven't even been talking about that. Shut up, TikTok. It's so dumb. Really? Seriously? Okay, well, apparently I'm telling you about Eileen Wuornos. Here we go again. Yeah, AI is so stupid. Anyway, witnesses describe her as a haunted figure, a woman with a wild look in her eyes, as if she was both predator and prey. In 1991, Eileen was arrested, and the world began to learn the details of the horrifying actions. During her trial, Eileen's testimony was chilling, filled with contradictions. And she said, and this is what she said, I unalived them, yes, but they were going to unalive me first. I just took my life back. Her defense argued that she was a victim of abuse and trauma, trying to reclaim her power in a world that stripped it away. But the court saw a predator. The media frenzy surrounding her trial only intensified the public's fascination with her story. And quite honestly, her defense was horrible. Horrible. I mean, her defense was a clown, with all due respect. And I will give credit, even her defense attorney came out and said, yeah, I kind of messed that one up. You think? Eileen was sentenced to death, and her life on death row was filled with reflections on her actions. In her final interview, she expressed a mix of remorse and defiance. She says, I'm not sorry for what I did. I did what I had to do. They pushed me to the edge. And her words echo the pain of a woman who felt trapped in a cycle of violence and abuse, and ultimately she was unalived in 2002. Now, here's what I can't. What bothered me so much about the Eileen Wuornos situation is the Richard Mallory. I can in self-defense, but there was a kind of like a retired clergy member that picked her up. She was a hitchhiker, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I needed help," and she talking to him, and this guy was not picking her up at all for anything else other than to get her a lift. That was it. That was it. And she unalived him because she wanted his car. And to me, there is no defense to that. There's no defense. And I think that's what happened with Eileen, is that once she did that once, that kind of encouraged her to do it again and again and again. Now, she claims that her partner at that time that was living with her, she knew. She knew what was going on with Eileen. She claims she didn't. But, I mean, she showed up with cars. Okay, the next, what we're going to talk about, she got a deal. The next person is Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy. Boy, I tell you what, this is you go deep into this case. So he was born in 1946 in Vermont. Growing up, he was described as shy and introverted, often struggling with feelings of inadequacy. Now, Bundy's early life was marked by instability, and he was raised by his grandparents, believing that his mom was his sister. Thank you. And this dissonance, it created a fractured identity that haunted him. So in his teenage years, Bundy developed an interest in true crime, which would later manifest in his own gruesome acts. He was very intelligent, charismatic, traits that would help him manipulate those around him. And this is what he said. He said, I had this insatiable craving for violence and control. It was like a dark shadow lurking inside me. Little did anyone know, this shadow would soon emerge. And in the early 1970s, Bundy began his unaliving spree, targeting young women, often college students. His modus operandi was chillingly clever. So he would fake an injury and ask for help, which would lure his victims into his trap. Bundy's charm made him seem trustworthy, and he used that to his advantage. He would often approach women in public places, sometimes wearing a cast or crutches to appear vulnerable. There was a survivor that said, "I thought he was just a nice guy who needed help. I had no idea he was a monster." So the survivor's chilling experience showcases Bundy's ability to manipulate and deceive, making his eventual crimes even more horrifying. And what's even more fascinating, this is how manipulative he was. At the end of his trial, the judge almost showed sympathy for charging him with this crime, saying, "Yeah, you just took the wrong path, but you just took the wrong path. It would have been an honor, to work law with you." I mean, this guy was like, "What? Did you not hear the trial?" But that is how brilliant he was in deception. Oh yeah, the judge was very complimentary, saying how it would have been an honor to be able to, work law and have him in his courtroom as a attorney. So Bundy's reign of terror spanned several states, including Washington, Oregon, Utah. He was known for his brutal methods, obviously abducting, assaulting, and unaliving. He often returned to the crime scenes to relive the horror, and sometimes he kept personal items from his victims as a memento, and his crimes grew increasingly violent. So witnesses actually reported seeing Bundy's distinctive Volkswagen Beetle, which, by the way, I've seen it, became a symbol of fear as it was associated with countless disappearances. Let me see if I can pull this up. Yeah, when I was at the museum, which I still haven't got, I got to get that done. I did it was in Gatlinburg, and they have a crime museum, and I got to see the actual car. So, and multiple things. I got so many pictures, goodness grief. I got 6,000. Okay, here it is. This is the actual, that's his Volkswagen. There it is. So that is his actual Volkswagen that he used. Oh yeah, it just doesn't, when you're around it. This is what the inside looks like, because he needed space to obviously do terrible things. So he took out one of the seats. But yeah, I mean, it just it really uncomfortable. So there you go. So anyway, he said, "I felt like I was living in a different world, one where I could control everything, life and death." So Bundy's chilling words revealed the depths of his twisted psyche, a man who reveled actually in the power that he held over people. And despite the growing number of missing person reports, Bundy eluded authorities for years. In 1975, his luck began to run out. So after being pulled over for a traffic violation, police discovered burglary tools in his vehicle. By the way, Ed Gein had nothing to do with Ted Bundy's arrest. So he was actually arrested because he was pulled over for a traffic violation. And that led to his eventual arrest and unraveling all his dark secrets. And a detective said, when we started piecing together the evidence, it became clear that we were dealing with a serial unaliver, and the realization was chilling. So Bundy's trial captured national attention, world attention, with many fascinated by this man, His charm, intelligence made him a subject of both fear and intrigue. During the trial, Bundy attempted to defend himself, saying he wanted to be his own attorney, showcasing his manipulative nature. He was found guilty of multiple unalivings, and he was sentenced to pass. So Bundy's trial was a spectacle. Media coverage, it portrayed him as both a monster and a tragic figure. So he tried to play the role of a misunderstood man. The evidence was overwhelming. So in 1979, he was sentenced for his crimes, and even while on death row, he continued to manipulate those around him, often giving interviews, attempting to downplay his actions. Ted Bundy said, "I had a compulsion that I couldn't control. I was out of my mind. I'm not a monster. I'm just a man who lost his way." Anyway, in 1989, he came to his end. All right, and we'll do one more, and then we'll get into Ed Gein. Richard Ramirez. Boy, the Night Stalker. So for those of you who don't know, from 1984 to 1985, Richard Ramirez terrorized the residents of LA, committed a series of brutal home invasions, assaults, and unaliving. His reign of terror left a community in fear, forever changed the lives of those he encountered. So he was born in 1960, El Paso, Texas. He was raised in a troubled household, exposed to violence and abuse from a very young age. His childhood was marked by trauma. His father was a police officer who had a violent temper, while his older cousin, Miguel, introduced him to the world of Satanism, which would heavily influence his later life. And as a teenager, Ramirez became increasingly involved in substances and petty crime, leading him down a dark path of violence. Anyway, he says, "I felt like I was possessed. The darkness was always there." That's what he said, whispering to me. And the chilling admission hints at the depths of this troubled person. So in the summer of 1984, Ramirez moved to LA. And that's where he would begin his reign of terror. His crimes were vicious and varied, targeting both men and women in their homes. So what he would do is he would break into homes at night, often using a rock to shatter windows, and he would then assault the victims, leaving behind a trail of plenty of evidence. His methods were brutal. He not only unalived, but also he assaulted and tortured his victims. He said, there was a survivor who said, "I woke up to a figure looming over me. I was paralyzed with fear." And he said, "Don't scream and you won't get hurt." But he was lying. And so the survivor's account encapsulates the terror that swept through LA. Many feared the Night Stalker. So as the body count rose, so did the media coverage. And the Night Stalker became a household name. The public grew increasingly paranoid. Doors were locked, windows barred. Many slept with a makeshift weapon by their side. And Ramirez's face was plastered on television screens and newspapers. He remained elusive. The police were overwhelmed. Community felt powerless. He wasn't just a criminal, he was a symbol of fear. The news anchor said residents are advised to remain vigilant. The Night Stalker is still at large. The police urge anyone with information to come forward. So the media frenzy only heightened the dread. So it wasn't until August 30, 1985, that Ramirez's reign of terror would come to an end. After a failed attempt to break into a house, he was chased down by a group of brave citizens. And in a dramatic turn of events, the community would not let him escape. They bravely apprehended him and held him until the police arrived. So Ramirez's capture was a turning point in the case. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His trial began in 1988, drawing massive attention. What's crazy, the courtroom was filled with survivors and family members of the victims seeking justice, and Ramirez, with his stupid trademark smirk, showed no remorse, often flashing a pentagram sign. And there were people that he had so many people that contacted him to wanted to marry him. As a matter of fact, one of his followers actually did marry him. Ridiculous. But he was sentenced and he passed away from complications relating to cancer in 2013 while still on death row. So the psychologist who said in the case, Ramirez was a product of his environment, but he also made choices. There's a darkness in him that cannot comprehend. And it's true. Now let's get into the Ed Gein story, because the Ed Gein story is very, very popular right now, especially with the brand new Netflix show. It's called Monster, the Ed Gein story. And there are many things in the show that just simply did not happen. And we're going to go over that. But first, let me give you a background on Ed Gein. So again, for those of you just joining us, I'm Bishop Long. I appreciate you guys being here. And make sure you go to kgradb.com. So Ed Gein was born in 1906 in Wisconsin. His story truly begins at the secluded farmhouse in Plainfield, where darkness took root. So the Gein family was far from ordinary. Now, Ed's mother, Augusta, she was a tyrant. She was a woman with a suffocating grip on her kids. She instilled in Ed a warped sense of morality, blending strict religious fervor with weird, just, this woman was nuts, with all due respect. I'm sorry, it just was. And from an early age, Ed was isolated, hidden away from the world. His father was an alcoholic, frequently absent, leaving Ed and his older brother Henry at the mercy of their mom's oppressive rules. Augusta often told her sons that women were evil, temptress, leading men to sin. And Ed took these lessons to heart, internalizing a fear and hatred for the very gender that he would later obsess over. Imagine young Ed trapped within the walls of the farmhouse, his world shrinking to the confines of his mother's twisted beliefs, while other boys played outside, and he spent his days in the shadows, listening to his mom's rants about sin and damnation. The only companionship that he had was his older brother, Henry. He eventually tried to break free from his mom's control, but Ed's escape was short-lived. Henry passed away under mysterious circumstances in 1944. Some say he was trying to protect Ed. Others whisper of foul play. Now, in the show, you do see Ed hitting his brother. Unfortunately, there was no sign of trauma at all, physical trauma, head trauma of his brother. So it was later ruled that it was from smoke inhalation from a fire. So after Henry's death, Augusta became the sole focus of Ed's attention. He was utterly devoted. And when she passed away in 1945, the last thread of his sanity was unraveled. So the day of Augusta's burial, his mom, was a turning point for Ed. He stood by her grave, consumed by grief and perhaps even something darker. The isolation that once bound him now transformed him into a desperate longing for connection. He began to visit the cemetery at night, digging up the graves of women who resembled his mom, seeking to bring them back to life in some way. He would return home with the bodies, treating them with macabre reverence. Imagine the horror of the townsfolk as they discovered that their loved ones had been disturbed from eternal rest. The fear rippled through the community. So let's pause for a moment. There was an interview from a local historian who spoke about Ed's early life and the eerie atmosphere of the Gein household. So the historian said that Ed Gein was a product of a deeply disturbed upbringing. His mom's extreme beliefs shaped his view of women and love. And after her death, he was left in a void, spiraling into madness. The community was terrified, whispering about the strange man who roamed the cemetery at night. So these chilling insights, I think, reveal how rooted Ed's darkness was, alone, haunted by the ghosts of the past. And in that desolate farmhouse, Ed Gein's mind twisted and turned, laying the groundwork for the horrors that would soon unfold. So after the passing of his mom, Ed Gein, already fragile, began to unravel completely. And so left alone in that decaying farmhouse, he became increasingly consumed by his obsession with death and the macabre. It was as if the walls themselves whispered to him, urging him to act in the darkest desires. So the isolation that had once been his prison became a twisted sanctuary. And in that desolate place, Ed began to venture into the local cemetery, drawn by an overwhelming compulsion. And under the cover of night, he would dig up the graves of women, specifically those who bore a resemblance of his beloved mom. So his hands, once innocent, now craved the touch of the dead. And as the townspeople went about their lives, unaware of the horrors unfolding in their midst, Ed's nocturnal excursions grew bolder. He meticulously preserved body parts, crafting them into grotesque trophies that line the walls of his home. And you need to be aware of this. This gets worse. It did not stop there. In 1957, Ed Gein crossed a line that would forever seal his place in infamy. He committed unaliving. The victim was Bernice Warden, a local hardware store owner. On that fateful day, Bernice would become the embodiment of Ed's darkest fantasies. So Ed had been a regular at her store, and that familiarity made it all the more chilling. He lured her into his home under the guise of needing supplies for a project. Once inside, he unleashed the full extent of his madness. And witness later recounted hearing a weapon that was echoed through the woods. And after unaliving Bernice, Ed did the unthinkable. So he dismembered her body with a cold, methodical precision, preserving parts of her in this home. The head part was found in a sack, and her organs were stored in a jar. Abominable collection that would haunt law enforcement for decades. As the investigation unfolded, the community was gripped by fear. People whispered about the strange man who lived on the outskirts of town. There was a reporter that said residents are urged to remain vigilant following the shocking unaliving of Bernice Warden. Authorities have launched full investigation. Rumors about a local man linked to the crime have stirred panic in the community. So the tension was palpable, and the fear that was hung thick in the air. And police began to piece, the pieces together. And so unfortunately, as police began to investigate, they would soon uncover the extent of Ed's depravity. What they found inside the farmhouse would forever change the landscape of horror in America. Ed Gein had become not just a unaliver, but a grotesque embodiment of fear. I cannot show the pictures on TikTok. I would be banned. So they won't let me. And I don't know if necessarily you want to see them, but they are grotesque. In a minute, I will show everyone on this camera. I'm sorry, I cannot show you guys. Okay. 1957, November, the tranquility of Plainsville was shattered because the disappearance of Bernice Warden had sent ripples of fear through the community. And as the sun rose, law enforcement began their investigation, quickly zeroing in on Ed. The townspeople had always found him peculiar, shy, withdrawn, silent speaking, quiet speaking. Deputies arrived at Ed's farmhouse. They were greeted by an unsettling silence, a stillness. And as they approached the door, they could sense something was deeply wrong. And inside, they were met with a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. No, she did not pass away in the hardware store. The officers discovered body parts that were scattered throughout the home. He made skin suits. So I'm going to say that, skin suits. Human bones fashioned into grotesque furniture, jars filled with organs. It was as if Ed had turned his very home into a macabre museum of death. One deputy later recounted the horror. Says, I felt like I was stepping into a nightmare. You could not believe what you were seeing. It was so surreal, so grotesque. Worse than Silence of the Lambs. Among the most shocking discoveries was Bernice Worden's head found in a burlap sack. Her body had been treated with a cold, clinical detachment that spoke volumes of his fractured mind. So the news spread, and fear gripped the community as they struggled to comprehend the reality of what transpired. One reporter said authorities have arrested Ed Gein, a local man linked to the gruesome unaliving of Bernice Worden. Investigators are uncovering shocking evidence inside his home, leaving the community in fear and disbelief. The media frenzy surrounding Ed Gein's arrest quickly turned into a national sensation, a monster lurking in the shadow. The grotesque details of his crimes were splattered across newspapers, drawing both horror and fascination. What he would do is he liked the feeling of wearing women's clothes. He felt as if he was born in the wrong body. He would take the skin suits of women that he put together, and he was trying to recreate his mom. And he would sometimes go out in the middle of winter and just dance outside. So authorities soon discovered that Ed was not only taking lives, but also going to graves and deranged attempt to recreate a woman suit, because that would allow him to embody his mom, to feel her presence once more. So the eyes of the nation turned to the small field, and Ed, once the shy, reclusive figure of the community, now sat at the center of a storm. The prosecution painted a picture of a monster, while the defense claimed that he was a product of a deeply fractured mind. As evidence was presented, the courtroom became a theater of horrors. Graphic depictions of Ed crimes were laid bare before the judge and jury. The details were so grotesque that some spectators fainted, and witnesses spoke of the grisly discoveries that's found in Ed's home, items made from human remains, the horrifying woman's suit that he wore, the chilling realization that Ed had not just taken lives, but also sought to wear them, to embody the very essence of a woman that he had lost. So the prosecutor said that Ed's actions were premeditated, and an observer said the trial was surreal. Listening to the details of Ed's actions felt like stepping into a horror movie. It was hard to believe a man could do such things. So I will show, this is an actual lamp that he made out of skin. Again, I cannot show on TikTok because I'd be banned. These are gloves that he made, that he wore. He had also a skull. In the movie, in the Netflix movie, there is a skull that the top part was removed, and he used it as a bowl. And this is the actual bowl that he made from the skull. Yeah, there is a face on it. This is also another picture of a lamp. You guys can go on. This is a belt that he made. These are also the gloves, a pair of gloves. I wish I could show you guys, but you guys can go to my other social media platforms and watch it later if you wish to see it. And of course, that's a picture of Ed Gein, which you guys can see that. So experts took the stand, attempting to dissect Ed's mind. Psychiatrists described him as deeply disturbed individual, grappling with schizophrenia. Anyway, as they continued, The trial concluded. Ed Gein faded into headlines. So the scars certainly were there. As the dust settled from Ed Gein's trial, a chilling legacy began to take shape. Now, Ed Gein's gruesome, he was, by the way, he was obviously found insane. There was intense deliberation. The jury returned their verdict. Ed Gein was found not guilty by reasons of insanity. In the court, some erupted in chaos, shouting in anger, others weeping. But for those of you who are aware of this, Norman Bates, consider Norman Bates from Psycho, a character whose unsettling relationship with his mom mirror Ed's own, the chilling notion of a man who lives within the shadows of his mom's influence. So Psycho, the movie Psycho, was influenced by Ed Gein. Also Leatherface. Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, a grotesque figure who wears a mask made from human skin. It's a nod to Ed's own skin suits. So there's a lot of, obviously, film and other things as well. Now, I want to go into what was true and what was not true as far as Ed Gein, especially with the Birdman. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Birdman, Richard Birdman Speck was a terrible human being. And if you haven't seen the show, so just understand there's going to be a little bit of spoilers here. This is by J.R. Radcliffe. And did Ed Gein exchange letters with Richard Birdman Speck, as portrayed in Netflix show's Monster? Well, the episode was titled Godfather. It's one of the numerous homages throughout the year, series to notable movies, et cetera, et cetera. So Richard Birdman Speck, 1966, he unalived 8 nursing students in Chicago, and he was later identified by his tattoo from a survivor who hid during the attack. He passed away in 1991 in prison, and he earned the name Birdman while caring for a sparrow during incarceration. 5 years after his death, the video surfaced of Speck in prison, showing him taking illicit substances and performing relations on other inmates. He had also appeared to grow breasts as a result of taking female hormones. So that is true. And by the way, that video led to a demand for change of Illinois' prison system. Now, did Richard Speck and Ed Gein communicate? There is no evidence at all that Speck and Gein corresponded, nor that Speck had any specific affinity for Gein's crimes. In the show, their bond leads to arrest of another unaliver, Ted Bundy, though there is no documentation the real-life Gein had any connection to that case whatsoever. So even the show leaves some doubt as to whether the entire sequence was merely imagined by Gein's, schizophrenia. Now, the show's recurring theme of Ed Gein as a bizarre inspiration tracks more neatly when it connects the movie to like Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs. So was Ed Gein considered a serial unaliver? Not by traditional definition of 3 or more unalivings in separate events. It fits the definition in 2 events. The evidence in Gein confessions pointed to the Plainfield man unaliving 2 women, in addition to digging up the graves of 9 or 10 other women. So Gein unalived tavern owner Mary Hogan in 1954, and a hardware store owner, Bernice Warden, 1957. He said that was it. He did not unalive anyone else that he remembers. He took accountability for 2. So the question becomes then, what Netflix monster? So the Ed Gein story, what did it get right and what did it get wrong? This is Catherine Caruso. So again, if you have not seen it, the Netflix hit series Monster tells the Ed Gein story, tells the story of one of America's most notorious unalivers. Ed Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield, was a gruesome unaliver and grave robber who terrorized women in and around Plainfield, Wisconsin. Again, I have to say unaliver because of TikTok rules and regulations. Monster portrays Gein, played by Charlie Hunnam, as an unassuming man who transforms into the Butcher of Plainfield as a result of his isolated upbringing, undiagnosed psychosis. So, did Ed Gein dig up his mom's body? Well, Ed Gein was a prolific grave robber. Gein frequently dug up bodies from the cemetery, but he never recovered the body of his beloved mother, Augusta. The show implies he did. He did not. Her death is what triggered him to start robbing graves in the first place. See, after Gein was unsuccessful in an attempt to exhume, because he tried, but he couldn't do it. So he turned his obsession elsewhere. Did he really make a skin suit? Well, Gein uses the remains he steals to make an assortment of grotesque items, including a woman's suit made of human skin. This is true. Police discovered these objects in the House of Horrors while investigating the disappearance of one of his victims. Gein later confessed to wearing the so-called skin suit to feel closer to his late mother. Did Ed Gein use a chainsaw as an unaliving tool? So elsewhere in the series, Gein is depicted brutally unaliving two hunters, Victor Travis and Raymond Burgess, with a chainsaw after they interrupted him while he's in the middle of torturing one of his victims. The real Gein did not use a chainsaw as his weapon of choice, preferring to use another weapon, whatever. Instead, there's no evidence of him trying to still unsolved disappearance of Travis. But that is important. There is also no evidence tying him to the still unsolved disappearance of these two hunters. So they did disappear, but they don't know who did it. So was Ed Gein in a relationship with his victim, Bernice Worden? So Monster takes a big swing in suggesting that Gein was in a romantic and a sexual relationship with his second confirmed victim, hardware store Bernice Worden. Now remember, Bernice Worden, he did say that he unalived her. And so their relationship ultimately comes to an end when he unalives her in the store. But in actuality, Gein admitted he never had any relations with her due to his strict religious upbringing, making it highly unlikely he knew Worden intimately before he unalived her. So he said no, he was never in a relationship with her. How many did he unalive? As I mentioned, the series shows Gein unaliving multiple people, including his brother, two hunters, a nurse, a babysitter, but he only ever confessed to two. And after he was arrested for unaliving Worden in 1957, he admitted to unaliving tavern owner Mary Hogan. Gein was eventually convicted of Worden's unaliving in 1968. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity after being diagnosed with schizophrenia. Was Gein a necrophiliac? Despite multiple scenes showing Gein engaging in adult acts with corpses, Gein made it very clear he denied ever participating in such activity. In fact, he said the remains, and this is why, because he was asked why he did not, and he is quoted as saying, because the remains smelt too bad. And did Gein help catch Ted Bundy? In Monster's 8th and final episode, Gein is seen helping the FBI with an active investigation into Ted Bundy, giving insight into him and sharing a letter from Bundy giving to him by another Richard, unaliver Richard Speck. None of this happened. There's no evidence Gein was ever interviewed by FBI. There's certainly no proof that he directly contributed to Bundy's capture. As I mentioned, Ted Bundy was captured because of someone pulled him over. Okay? So, yeah. Yes, he did make masks and suits out of human skin. No, the house is no longer standing. It caught fire. Yeah, Gein is remembered less for the unalivings that he committed than for what he did to the corpses that were in his possession. Time magazine, they really did found a chamber of horrors at the farmhouse. There were 10 skins of human heads, neatly separated from the skull, assorted pieces of human skin, somewhere between the pages of magazines. Some made it into small belts. Some skins were used to upholster chair seats. The largest piece rolled up on the floor was the front upper section of a woman's torso. There were also a box of noses. In episode 2, Gein is seen eating from a bowl made out of a human skull. This particular artifact was also reported to be in Gein's house, along with a face mask made from Hogan's belt or skin, a belt made of... Anyway. So there were components, parts of a woman's suit, including leggings, a corset made of skin designed to help him literally inhabit his mom's body. Again, I talked about... Now, the Evelyn Hartley, what's important to know, Evelyn Hartley was the babysitter. And she was a real-life 15-year-old who disappeared from La Crosse, Wisconsin in 1953. So thank you very much. On the show, Gein kidnaps unalives Hartley after she takes his babysitting job from him. But according to the Charlie Project, Gein denied having any involvement in Hartley's disappearance. There's no evidence linking to her disappearance at all. So despite new clues resurfacing in 2004, her case remains unsolved. No, he did. I mean, there's no... Yeah, I mean, he did odd jobs like that from time to time. But no, there's no evidence whatsoever that he unalived the babysitter. And again, I think what's important is for at least for this time to explain what was real and what is not, especially because there's so many people that were interested in this movie, in this show. And there's a lot here. Now, as far as the way he talks, did Ed Gein really talk like he did in the Netflix show, like the actor did? Well, it's interesting. Charlie Hunnam discussed with Variety the process of cultivating Ed Gein's voice. So recording of Gein's voice are rare, but Hunnam was able to get audio of a 70-minute interview. So that is really how he was able to detect that. And he sat and he listened and listened and listened. And I think that's how he got this. I'm trying to see. One second here. I'll show. See if I can find it, because I actually heard a real sounding of his voice, and.
You work all right at that then? No. I just think, yeah, that's right.
That's right.
What you do with the sexual part?
Seven.
One was painted, they said.
Oh, that one, when they died, yeah.
It's hard to hear, but that.
I guess, is there anything like,
So that he was very quiet spoken, and that's his voice. As far as the girlfriend, Aileen Watkins, in the show, it had her she was basically helping him in these collaborating in these crimes. Gein was friendly with a woman named Adeline Watkins for a short time. Her role in the TV show really is greatly exaggerated, and it's mostly outright fictionalized. The real Watkins gave an interview in Minneapolis newspaper about their relationship. It was characterized as a two-decade romance, but she clarified in a follow-up interview that the details were blown out of proportion. She said that they had shared a love of reading. Ed had developed an interest in tribal cultural practices around the world, which he read about in geography magazines. And though she is portrayed in the first episode of the miniseries, the real-life Adeline Watkins refuted the idea that she had a lengthy romance with Gein. She insisted she didn't know him well until 1954, long after the events of the first episode. And she said that their closeness lasted roughly about 7 months and only intermittently. She said they attended some movies together, that she'd never been inside his house, and that Gein never shared any additional information about Watkins. So the show portrays Watkins introducing Gein to the story of Elise Koch, a real-life criminal in World War II in Germany. Both Koch and Gein were notable for creating a lampshade out of human skin. Though it isn't clear that Gein had followed her story particularly closely, Watkins would not have been the person to introduce him to that information. Did he model his actions after this German person named Koch? Well, Gein easily could have been aware of Koch's war atrocities during Germany, but there isn't any indication that he held her in esteem, that the show version of that Gein does, nor that he modeled any behavior after her. A later episode of the show features a conversation over radio between Koch and Gein. At the time, the prisoners were world apart. The exchange is later revealed to be a schizophrenic episode. Koch is played by Vicky Krieps, a Luxembourg actress, perhaps best known for American audiences for a role in Paul Thomas Anderson's Best Picture nominee, Phantom Thread. Did that happen? Yes. However, so what happened is when Ed was already in the hospital, he would have this radio, and in his mind, he was thinking that he was talking to Koch, and she was in Germany. She was arrested for the atrocities in World War II. And so the doctors and the nurses would watch this conversation that he would have. And so he would have a full conversation with himself as Ed Gein, and then he would answer in the voice of Koch. Again, there is absolutely no indication at all that there was a love relationship between Ed Gein and Bernice Worden of the hardware store. Yeah. And really, I mean, the nature of the unaliving is consistent with real life events, but investigators question Gein on the show because they find a gift tag addressed to Eddie from the warden. In real life, Gein was identified because he left a receipt for antifreeze. And so the last thing Warden sold in her store. That's how the investigators found out. It wasn't because they went to his to the home and he found this little gift from her. That's not how it was at all. He bought antifreeze, and that was the last thing she sold. So during his stay at the Central State Hospital, Gein told doctors that he had never ever had any adult relations consistent with the strict religious code imparted by his late mom. The discovery of this woman's decapitated body in Gein's shed, grisly as it was a shed. It was not in a great big farmhouse or in a barn. Closely mirrors reality that even looks almost exactly like how the body looked in crime scene photographs. So it was as if like you would butcher a deer. Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's pretty grotesque. It is interesting. Did Ed Gein actually babysit children? Yes. And though the television the television show portrays Gein as a character so eccentric that townspeople don't feel comfortable even sharing a nearby seat with him, at a local diner. Gein was enigmatic. He was trustworthy to the locals in his younger years. Thank you. He did odd jobs around the town. And according to Ed Gein, of course, he would also even occasionally watch local children for a short time when the parents had to run for a local errand. Yeah. And by the way, there is no indication, there's nothing at all that proves that Gein drove children to his home, subsequently scaring them with the remains that he kept there. That was portrayed in the show. That did not happen. That did not happen. But yes, there were quite a few body parts that he unearthed from cemeteries. That is true. And he told investigators that his deep conflicted connection to his mom made him want to become a woman, a more like one. And after repeatedly visiting his mom's grave in the cemetery, he decided he was going to become one because his mom just made it clear to him all his life, that adult relations was evil, it was bad, it was terrible. Now, again, people are asking about, did he retrieve his mom's body? No, thank you very much. No, because episode 2 implies that one of the bodies that Gein brought back to the house was of his own mom, Augusta. And, but remember, the Gein character later even admits that it was not his mom's body. So he did visit her grave regularly, but she was not one of the bodies that was unearthed. And Adeline is brought home to meet his mom. But the real life walk-ins clarified in an interview. So the young lady that he was seeing in the show, he brings her to meet his mom. Well, remember, his mom at that time had already been passed. But the real life walk-ins clarified in an interview that she never went inside his home. And her relationship with him was not as long-standing as the show implies. So there's no indication that it would have been a secret in Plainfield that Augusta, Gein had passed away. But in the show, Ed's character is able to mislead people about her status. And that makes Gein seem more consistent with the character Norman Bates of Psycho. But everyone knew when she passed away. Everybody knew that. Did Alfred Hitchcock cast Anthony Perkins in Psycho because he was like Ed Gein? Well, in episode 3, the character of Alfred Hitchcock tells the character of Anthony Perkins that he has to play the role of Norman Bates in Psycho because he was like him, meaning like Ed Gein. And Hitchcock refers to a dark secret that Anthony Perkins harbors. Obviously, that's presumably a reference to Perkins' status as a closeted gay man, something Hitchcock likely knew, and not because Perkins had homicidal tendencies. So the role defined Perkins for good and bad, changing his career. But yes, that is true because he had a secret. Here's the deal. From all, I hate this, but from all the corpse, the show clearly shows that he practiced necrophilia. But there was no evidence that the real life Gein repeatedly denied having relations with these corpses. What he wanted to do was to create an entire woman's suit because in his mind, that would help him grow closer to his mom who had passed away. And so he wanted to assume that woman identity, the gender identity of a woman, so that he could live his life through his mother's eyes rather through his. Now, a cannibal, there's also a question, was he a cannibal? Gein denied that he ever ate human flesh. There's no evidence that he had. The show, by the way, implies that he had at least flirted with the idea and that he distributed venison to area residents, leaving some to question if he was actually giving them human flesh to eat. But there's no indication that that happened at all. And was there an auction? So after of Ed Gein's belongings, after he was arrested, was there an auction? So in the show, there's a big auction. Yes, there was. Several items from Gein's home were sold after his crimes were unearthed, and his farmhouse was actually set ablaze. It was caught fire and ruined. But his 1949 Ford was purchased for $760, taken around the area as an exhibition item, including a charge for admission. It was subsequently banned from fairs because of its grisly origin. But yes, that actually, there was quite a few people that went into the Gein house. That's kind of like how it was. The show made it look, it was bigger than what it was, but there were quite a few people that did go into the house to purchase these items from Ed Gein. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's but that actually did happen. Yeah, it's kind of like, wow, that's nuts when you think about it, but it happened. One thing that I want to talk about before, and if you guys have questions, jump in there. I want to share with you from the FBI's site about these serial unalivers. There are 7 psychological phases that we see from a person who does these terrible things. Okay, and I want to share this with you guys. First, there is called what's the aura phase. The aura phase, A-U-R-A, the aura phase, the person begins to put a distance between himself or herself and social reactions. So to a certain extent, they begin to drift away from reality. Sometimes the situation can go insidiously unnoticed by family and friends, and continues for like an unpredictable short or long time. There's fantastic thoughts begin to gain weight. And in most cases, the thoughts manifest themselves as violent adult behavior thoughts or other violent thoughts. Then you have what's called the trolling phase. TikTok. The trolling phase. And this phase usually involves the process of forming an idea about the space of the potential victims. Usually, serial unalivers go through the process of searching for victims where they know or feel comfortable. However, there's also a tendency to determine where they will commit the crime, maybe deal, with the leftovers, if you will. And then there's the third phase is called the flirting phase. So the unaliver is focused on gaining the trust of the victim. Typically, that phase is used by more daring, planned, and socially developed unalivers. They try to socialize with the victim sometimes. And once trust is gained, then the unaliver takes the victim to a quiet, previously planned place. And then there's the fourth phase is what is called the capturing phase. And as the name suggests, it's the phase in which the unaliver fully reveals their intentions. And then, of course, the fifth phase is the unaliving phase. So at this point, the serial unaliver actually performs a ritual in their own way. Sometimes it can be accompanied by prolonged torture, necrophilia, sometimes leading to sudden passing. John Wayne Gacy enjoyed torturing, and that is something that he preferred. He preferred the process of that, whereas Dahmer, he described death as a means to an end. Those were his words. That it's not something that he preferred, but he wanted what came afterwards. And really his desire of doing what he did exacerbated the issue when he was in class and they did a dissection. And he said that the insides of this animal, the different colors, caused him to be incredibly excited. And then you have the sixth phase, which is called the totem phase. So in other words, the unaliver experiences a huge decline. They kind of wake up from their fantasy. In fact, these ups and downs are said to be the key driving force. Even with Dahmer, he said, even in prison, he had it. Sometimes at this point of time, the reception of souvenirs from the victim is very common. So it is incredibly common for them to take these things to use as memories, clothing, piece of a body, photos, videos, jewelry. Gacy did this. Dahmer certainly did this. They all did it. All the unalivers did this, we see. And then you have the seventh stage, which is called the depression phase. And in that final phase, the unaliver tends to decide is their next unaliving. Yeah, like a trophy. But it was more than a trophy. Jeffrey Dahmer said it was a way to relive the memory and to feel that you still have control and manipulation and power over that person. That's one of the reasons why Dahmer said he consumed, because he wanted that person to be inside. He wanted to be one with that person. So the depression phase is so intense that sometimes the unaliver can't even feel the strength to commit unaliving of themselves. And then after a while, they return to the fantasy world. And that's where you have the cool-off phase. And that's when these fantasies start building up again. And that's when, unfortunately, they do terrible things once again. But we see with these traits, many of them, as far as, and again, by the FBI, they lack empathy. They lack any remorse. Many of them are impulsive. They have this grandiosity ideology. They think very highly of themselves. They're incredibly narcissistic. They have superficial charm, very manipulative. They have a lust for power. But what's interesting, as far as the empathy, Dahmer had talked about that, and so did Gacy. Gacy said that when it was done, it was done. He just didn't think about it. And yeah. And the lack of remorse is quite alarming. So there are exceptions, however. So Dahmer stated, quote, "I should be dead for what I've done." And even, perhaps even Edmund Kemper, he turned himself in. But in these instances, they're very rare, very, very rare. And most of them all say that they wanted to stop, but they could not. And Ed Kemper is unbelievably a brilliant man. If you don't know him, I mean, and even the BTK unaliver, the Zodiac unaliver, he had a grandiosity perspective of himself. And he purposely toyed with police because he thought he was so intellectually superior. Yeah, right. Yeah, Jennifer, yeah. Very narcissistic. Ted Bundy, without question, the superficial charm. Manipulative, unbelievably manipulative. A lot of people don't know this person, but there's an individual, his name was Dean Corll, and he unalived 28 young boys in the early 1970s after alluring them to his home, where he, terrible. And, but we absolutely see John Wayne Gacy doing the same thing. But if you don't know, for those of you, the Candyman, this is one, Dean Corll is one of the individuals that created this Candyman persona. So he would always lure them with candy. And if you don't know anything about this, what was interesting is he was drafted in the United States Army in 1964. And he was later assigned in Georgia, Fort Benning. He trained as a radio repairman before his permanent assignment in Fort Hood, Texas. And according to official military records, Corll's period of service in the Army was unblemished. And he hated military service, so he applied for a hardship discharge on the grounds that he was needed for his family business, and the Army granted his request. So after 10 months of service, but there was no issues, and there's a coral candy company. So following his discharge from the Army, he returned to Houston Heights and resumed the position that he had as a vice president of the candy company. But if you don't know much about this person, this is terrifying in of itself. It's Dean Corll, Corll. But these people are they have a lust for power, sensation seeking. There are some for animal behavior that they shouldn't have done. What was interesting, because many of the belief that these traits display a lack of self-control and a lack of empathy, two things which contribute to the makeup of a homicidal adult. Even Jeffrey Dahmer, Edmund Kemper, John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, they all have animal, violence. That was a staple of their childhood. Arson had bedwetting. That was a little hard to clarify. But it goes on and on. I mean, it's unbelievable these people still that they exist. And what's even more frightening is that there are serial unalivers that are alive right now. I would tell you, when I was a chaplain for the police department in a major metro police department, there were a couple of cases, and it's kind of frightening stuff. But hang tight. For those of you who are listening to this on podcasts, we're going to say goodnight to you guys. Yeah, we're going to close up shop here in just a second. It is disturbing. But again, it's important to have these conversations because the conversations will let people know that this stuff exists. And it is scary. Now, at this point in time, I am planning, at this moment, I am planning to be in Scarefest next week. And we're trying to figure out some things, and I don't know. We'll have to figure out what's going to happen. I don't know. But I'm going to publish this. So now the podcast is being published. And there we go. It's in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm giving a presentation at Scarefest in Lexington. And I enjoy doing it, but there, obviously there is no pay for that. And the hotels are ungodly expensive in that area. I mean, just ungodly. So I'm having difficulties with, trying to wrap my mind around, giving a presentation for free on Saturday, which I'm one of the featured speakers, and then trying to, figure out why in the world. I mean, it's very expensive to stay there. So if I check in Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, check out on Sunday, that's going to be, that's close to $1,000. So I don't know if it makes a lot of sense to pay $1,000 to give a free presentation. So, but anyway, we'll see. All right. Okay, doke. My side. Okay, you're okay. That's right. Who you send you also address and contact. Send me a message. Okay. All right, everybody. So we're going to wrap things up here. For those of you who are watching on all the other social media platforms, remember I tell you your value does not decrease based on someone's inability or refusal to see your worth. I want to remind you that tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to have night prayer. So, look, this is a Paranormal Friday shows. And some of the shows are very, very scary. And tonight is quite frightening. And what's even frightening about it is that this is real. And that makes it even more frightening. So TikTok, stay with me. We're going to wrap this up on all the other social media platforms. Please join us. Hopefully you'll be with us tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for night prayer. Until then, God bless, and we'll see you guys next week.